The
in Jamaica.
President Donald Trump's
waste
executive.
reduction.
Marcus Petrol.
Good day, I'm Kimberly Wright, and welcome to News Rewind, JNN's look at the top stories of the week that was. With less than a month into the new year, the number of reported murders in Jamaica has hit the 100 mark. This was revealed in data obtained from the Jamaica Constabulary Force cover period, January 1 to January 20. A breakdown of the data revealed that 13 more people were murdered when compared to the corresponding period in 2017. The St. Catherine North and Clarendon police divisions each recorded 13 murders. 9 were reported in the St. Andrews South division. However, while there has been an increase in killings, there has been a reduction in other major crimes. Reported cases of aggravated assault declined by 51%, while break-ins were down by 50%. The data for the January 1 to 20 period also showed a 60% decline in rape. The number of reported robberies fell by 16%. There are reports out of Canada that the daughter of the Canadian couple found murdered at their home in St. Thomas 2 weeks ago is making arrangements to return the bodies to the country. However, she has expressed concerns that Jamaican investigators may not have the manpower to adequately probe the case. We have more in this report from CTV News.
A couple murdered in Jamaica is facing several challenges bringing their bodies back to Canada.
So I do know that because they're Canadians, they're doing something about it. But had they been simply Jamaican nationals, I don't know.
Melbourne Flake and his wife Etta were found dead in their St. Thomas vacation home January 9th. Their daughter Debbie Olfert says she's waiting on a signature from the coroner's office in Jamaica to release their bodies. After that, she says it will cost about $13,000 plus airfare to transport their bodies to Winnipeg. She also is hoping for justice.
Because I have been informed that there are some strong leads that the police are following, I'm extremely encouraged. However, I do understand that the police department is extremely stretched.
Olfert says RCMP have offered to help in the investigation, but the Jamaican force has turned down the offer. RCMP in Ottawa won't comment on international investigations. The Canadian government is warning travelers seeking sun in Jamaica to exercise a high degree of caution. Last week, Jamaican authorities imposed a military lockdown in St. James Parish.
It has been less than a week since the state of public emergency was declared in Montego Bay, St. James. Reports are that several men have already been detained. Shauna Gay Warren has the details.
The police have reported that since the state of emergency was announced on Thursday, more than 100 persons have been detained at the Freeport police station in Montego Bay, St. James. In light of this, the Office of the Public Defender has started taking steps to intervene in the matter. Public Defender Arlene Harrison Henry has confirmed that information is being gathered which will guide what action her office takes. Up to news time, the police had reported that 197 persons were taken into custody over a period of 3 days. Some have been granted bail and others released without charge. However, up to Monday afternoon, there were 111 persons still in custody, with 10 of them to be charged with various offenses. Mrs. Harrison Henry added that her office is closely monitoring the situation.
We have not received complaints, but we are certainly monitoring what is happening. And you have to remember that we don't have to receive a complaint to investigate something. So this is a matter that is high on our radar and on our priority. We're actually intended to go into Montego Bay today, but we said no. Let us get a report from our office first before making that journey into Montego Bay. So it is not far from our agenda and our thoughts, not at all.
In the meantime, the public defender is awaiting a report on the situation at the Freeport police station.
Our concerns relate not only to legal representation, but also to the general conditions under which these detainees are being held. I will get a full report and I'll be able to make a more definitive statement on the condition, because we know that we have a problem with overcrowding. And we know also that in 2010, the conditions under which the detainees were kept, those conditions were absolutely deplorable, unsuited, inappropriate, and in violation of basic standards.
The state of public emergency was declared by Prime Minister Andrew Holness on January 18 at Jamaica House in response to an upsurge of crime in St. James.
The Office of the Children's Advocate OCA is ramping up its resources to secure legal representation for children who have been detained under the state of emergency in St. James.
More than 100 persons have been detained so far under the state of emergency in St. James, and the number is expected to increase. Frontline News understands that several minors were detained up to Tuesday afternoon. Children's advocate Diane Gordon Harrison says her office is mobilizing its resources to get legal representation for these children. She added that this is on the basis of reports her office has received. Human rights advocates and legal practitioners have expressed concerns about reports of severe overcrowding and dehumanizing conditions inside the detention centers, in addition to health risks. Mrs. Gordon Harrison explained how the matter was brought to the attention of the OCA.
The Office of the Children's Advocate became aware of this during the course of today, and we have confirmed through correspondence from the Detention and Courts Unit within the JCF and also through dialogue with the courts in St. James that there are in fact some minors who have been detained for questioning and are of other interest, we understand, to the police.
The Children's Advocate shared the nature of the intervention being contemplated by the OCA.
The Office of the Children's Advocate is currently putting together a response, really, to provide legal representation, not to frustrate the efforts of the security forces at all, but merely to facilitate the process from the perspective of each person has a right to legal representation, and then also to see if we need to do an assessment of the lockups.
The state of public emergency was declared by Prime Minister Andrew Holness on January 18 at Jamaica House in response to an upsurge in crime in St. James.
Meanwhile, alarms have been raised in St. James that the security forces are not complying with regulations, which were published to guide how they operate under the state of emergency.
The state of public emergency was declared on January 18 by Prime Minister Andrew Holness in response to an upsurge in crime in St. James. There are no reports that the Jamaica Constabulary Force and the Jamaica Defense Force are not carrying out their operations in line with regulations that were published. Sources say there continues to be a significant delay in the release of persons who have been arrested and processed by the police. The state of affairs has been raised by the Cornwall Bar Association. Since the start of the state of emergency a week ago, there has been a rapid increase in the number of detainees, and overcrowding has started to generate health concerns. President of the Cornwall Bar Association, Stacey Ann Young, said the group remains deeply concerned about the matter.
For the persons who I have interviewed, for most of them, there does not seem to be any clear pattern or indication that these persons were persons of interest. And we see where the guidelines were tabled and they've been published. And according to the guidelines, persons are not supposed to be just picked up arbitrarily. There still has to be some suspicion that these persons would have been interfering with the peace, or that they would have been wanted in connection to some kind of offense. And what we find is that there's no real questioning, there's no real basis, so there's no method that is being implemented, but just the arbitrary detention. And that is of concern to us at this time.
The regulations accompanying the state of emergency also provide for the establishment of the Emergency Powers Review Tribunal, which will review cases of detention or restriction. The members of the tribunal were named on Wednesday. The Cornwall Bar Association has given an update on the scores of persons who have been detained and are scheduled to be processed and released.
In relation to the persons who are in custody, when I attended the Freeport lockup this afternoon at about 4 o'clock, none of the persons that were taken up in the general dragnet. None of those persons were released as yet. But before I left, I was advised that they were rechecking their list to ensure that they would release the persons who advised yesterday that they were to be released. So there is some significant delay in terms of the processing and release of persons that the police have indicated that they do not have an interest in.
Over 100 persons were detained up to Wednesday afternoon in Montego Bay, St. James.
As several Jamaicans laud the Sentence Reduction Day initiative, many, including opposition spokesman on justice, Senator Donna Scott Motley, are calling for an overhaul of the justice system. Akuya Rademari has more.
Opposition spokesperson on justice, Senator Donna Scott Motley, described the Sentence Reduction Day initiative as commercialized.
The manner in which it was done, discount days, sounded like a commercialization of justice, like justice was really for sale. Now, if you recall, we have always had the situation where if you plead guilty, that is taken into account by any judge because it is felt that you have spared funds that could be spent in investigation, you have saved time in the courts and so on, and that you have shown that you have some kind of remorse about the act that you have committed. The way in which the sentence reduction days have been promoted, I think, is unfortunate because it suggests almost like a 2-for-1.
She said the Sentence Day Reduction Initiative should have been promoted more among attorneys who might not have been aware of the provision in the Criminal Administrative Act rather than to the public. Senator Scott Motley added that the Act makes provision for a reduced sentence if a person pleads guilty in certain situations. However, this does not include cases of murder. She said in order to address certain inequities in the justice system, a holistic view must be taken when dealing with the administration of justice.
The manner in which it was done, discount days, sounded like a commercialization of justice, like justice was really for sale. Now, if you recall, we have always had the situation where if you plead guilty, that is taken into account by any judge because it is felt that you have spared funds that could be spent in investigation, you have saved time in the courts and so on, and that you have shown that you have some kind of remorse about the act that you have committed. The way in which the sentence reduction days have been promoted, I think, is unfortunate because it suggests almost like a 2-for-1.
In the meantime, Senator Scott Motley noted that the state of emergency in Montego Bay, St. James, is causing turmoil.
The party leader, Dr. Peter Phillips, this morning, the leader of opposition, actually advocated that. Good. Because as he said, if you put 2 more judges there, devoting a particular time to dealing with those matters, then the people will feel that it's a really serious attempt to deal with the situation. Yes. Right now we are treating with crime as though it were an event. Yes. So we have an event of Zozo, we have an event of the state of emergency. But if we have a plan, included in that plan we must strengthen the justice aspect of it.
The illegal petrol trade in Montego Bay was hampered last week. This as members of the security forces arrested a number of individuals after stopping them and finding in their possession thousands of liters of petrol. Jamaica Gasoline Retailers Association President Philip Chong says this has been going on for a long time and there are other similar operations across the island. Cody and Barrett has more.
It was reported that 7 men were arrested after the security forces seized 20,000 liters of petrol valued at $2.5 million during a special operation along Bay Road and Pimento Way in Montego Bay on Friday. JGRA President Philip Chong said the petroleum trade continues to be plagued by illegal operators.
And more sophisticated.
And more sophisticated, yes.
But let me understand the advantage. There must be a considerable price advantage for this thing to thrive. Whose margin is being cut out? Is the fuel that comes that is sold in these illegal places, are they fully taxed?
Well, I would say yes, because tax is done at source.
Yes.
You know, and how it enters the street now is a phenomenal thing, because some companies, and along with the new legislation to control the transportation, is that these vehicles should have trackers on them. But it is not yet.
You're not there to, yes.
Yes. I mean, the more we have growth in the industry or diversification of the industry with a lot more players in it, it seems to be the less control we have.
Mr. Chong said the vehicles carrying the petrol are not subjected to audit and trafficking. This, he says, makes it easier for the transportation of the illegal petrol.
Not as yet. It's not fully implemented.
And that's crazy.
There are some companies that have it, yes, and kudos to them. There's some that don't.
So it's quite possible for renegades to carry the fuel elsewhere?
Quite easily. I mean,
yes.
Let's look at something that happened the other day. Freeport. It's a refueling terminal, yeah? And the culprits are caught outside of Freeport, and by my understanding and reading comments, it has been going on for quite a long time in full view of everybody.
He further explained that the full value is not being paid for by retailers, and therefore the quality and the safety of the petrol cannot be guaranteed.
If product is outside of the refinery, it's accountable to someone, whether the retailer or the end user, meaning the wholesaler.
Yes.
Right, from that perspective. And it ends up in the hands of an illegal retailer. I hate to use the word retailer, but an illegal user or seller. Then that cost to him is like nothing. So something from nothing is 100% profit.
Yes.
And you look at it. So it's vast in terms of the profitability of that. And of course, they just sell it to motorists who are willing to buy it.
The JGRA president is imploring the government to implement strategies to reduce the problem in order to avoid further issues. Mr. Chung said the JGRA will be doing its part in the clampdown on illegal gas operations. Now, as Jamaica anticipates a by-election in the St. Andrew Northwestern constituency, the Jamaica Labour Party has identified 2 persons having an interest to represent it at the polls. The candidate is to be confirmed by midweek. Shauna Gay Warren has more.
The St. Andrew Northwestern seat has been vacant following last week's resignation of Derek Smith. The Jamaica Labour Party, JLP, has revealed that either Ambassador for Economic Affairs Dr. Nigel Clark or Councillor for the Chancery Hall Division Dwayne Smith, the son of Derek Smith, will represent it when the by-election is called. JLP General Secretary Dr. Horace Chang disclosed that the party will decide who will represent it by Wednesday.
Mr. Clark's obviously is a clear possibility, but, Mr. Smith, who is the Derek Smith one, is in there, who is a capable young man. So the party is looking at all the possibilities. Dwayne is a young man who has the experience, grew up with his father in the seat, has political experience and know-how. Nigel Clark is the kind of person that would be good to have back in the political arena, in the technical capacity and what they bring to the table. And Jamaican politics needs some people like him right now. So we want to ensure that it is, whatever happens, the continent remains together and we can go forward with the best choice at this point in time.
In the meantime, the Electoral Office of Jamaica says it will be ready whenever the by-election is called.
Based on what was reported on the radio, the Electoral Office will initiate some preliminary preparation. For example, we'll establish a budget. However, we anticipate some formal advice from the Parliament, which is usually done once resignation is made to the House. we anticipate that whenever it is announced that we'll be able to facilitate it with little or no concern once the monies are provided. At this point in time, we have not established a budget, and therefore I couldn't speak to the anticipated cost.
Even though the JLP says it wants an early by-election, up to news time, the opposition People's National Party had not yet decided on who will represent it.
Prime Minister Andrew Holness is putting a positive spin on the long-term impact of the state of emergency now underway in St. James. Cody and Barrett has that story.
The Prime Minister told participants at the opening of the 13th Jamaica Stock Exchange Regional Investment Conference that it will redound to the benefit of all the markets and Jamaica as well.
There will be some initial jitters about definitive actions to manage this crime situation. But I think in the medium term, the country will benefit significantly. It is the intention of the government to be persistent in these measures. These are not short-term measures.
Speaking at the Jamaica Pegasus on Tuesday, he said those behind the street-level criminals will also be targeted.
But to address those who facilitate, support, and give succor to the street-level criminals, we should never believe that the street-level criminals operate on their own. They are financed. They use our banking network. They are well connected. They use our telecommunications infrastructure. They have good transportation. They use our roads. They buy our cars. And they use them in the commission of crimes.
Turning to the economy, Mr. Holness identified 5 pillars on which to achieve what he describes as the growth doctrine. Among them, macroeconomic stability, job creation, renewal of infrastructure, as well as public sector reform.
The government has undertaken a very comprehensive program of public sector reform. It has started, and we are already seeing some benefits. We know it is not going to be easy. It will require some amount of right-sizing. It will require that we introduce far more intensive programs of performance-based management and performance-based reward systems.
The conference is slated to hear from leaders of industry as well as capital markets under the theme Driving Growth, Regional Investments for the Climate of Change.
The global shift to more advanced technology may result in the loss of 60% of the jobs in Jamaica. Although this poses some threat to the workforce, many argue that it can be beneficial to our economy. Head of Institute of Sustainable Development at the University of the West Indies, Professor Anthony Clayton, addressed concerns about replacing people with machines. One issue he discussed was if manufacturers and organizations replaced human labor with artificial intelligence, what it would mean for those who are acquiring training at universities.
What is it people will go to school for? What will people go to university for?
Yes.
In the fairly near future, you will be able to buy for the equivalent of $1,000 a device which will probably be a wearable device. It will be very, very small, and it will have more processing capacity than a supercomputer does today, and we're probably 5 or 10 years away from that. Now that means that
5 or 10 years.
Professor Clayton spoke on the benefits of having these devices and the impact they might have on the education system in the long run.
You will have a device which has access to all of the world's libraries, has access to enormous analytical capacity, and you will be able to ask this device any question and get the answer. So the idea that knowledge consists of packing your head with facts, that concept of knowledge will become less relevant.
But what are the advantages and disadvantages and the effect this will have on the country and its workers?
what we're going to have to do is think about, and we should really start this process now, think about how our economy is going to be restructured by this change so that we can find ways to give people useful and productive things to do. Otherwise, the social consequences could be devastating.
We take a break. News Rewind will be right back with the top business stories.
The NSW
in Jamaica. President Donald Trump's
waste reduction.
Market separately.
Welcome back to News Rewind. Now for the top business stories of the past week. Finance Minister Audley Shaw has continued his unrelenting attack on those he describes as speculators in the foreign exchange market. He told the patrons at the JSE Investment Conference at the Pegasus Hotel that Jamaica has more in its armory to defend against the dollar.
That not only are our reserves at record levels, but under the standby arrangement with the International Monetary Fund right now, we have access to another 1.6 billion US dollars if we need it. And because we have passed the past two tests, we already have access to almost 800 million of that. Half of it, we have access to it if we need it. So just everybody just cease and desist. If you have foreign exchange, find something productive to deploy your foreign exchange in, not in speculation.
The use of cryptocurrency to replace the usual forms of doing business is still being weighed in the balance. Some see it as a bubble waiting to burst, while others are promoting it as a viable investment. While the jury is out on this phenomenon in trading, the position of NCB Capital Markets is to wait and see. The issue was addressed by its Chief Executive Officer, Stephen Gooden. He notes that there is need for more research as well as control.
There's a need for greater understanding, one, and for cryptocurrency trading to be, I would say, more regulated, right? It is something that we don't participate in as an institution, right, for the two reasons that I mentioned earlier, right? But I do believe that, there's an opportunity to better understand it. And I do believe that the platform that it's built on, there's some usefulness where that is concerned.
Now, Managing Director of Flow Jamaica, Stephen Price, says we are more vulnerable than we think to cybercrime. Mr. Price recommended how to combat cybercrime in Jamaica.
In 2016, Jamaica is estimated to have lost US 100 million to cybercrime, and in 1 month, over 230,000 active cyber threats were detected. Right here. Also in 2017, there was a Carabanat-like attack on a Jamaican financial institution with the intention of siphoning money in a similar method to the 2014 hacker group that stole US $1 billion over 2 years from 100 banks internationally. While these local incidents represent a small fraction of the global figure, they illustrate that our island nation is not immune to cybercrime. Simply put, not investing in cybersecurity means that your business...
And that's your News Rewind for this week. I'm Kimberly Wright. Thanks for watching.